And blessed to be with you, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Coming up, we'll continue to get your thoughts on your reaction to the shootings in Dayton and El Paso, the trade war with China, and many other issues. Boise High changing its mascot's name. A lot of things going on this morning. Let's go out to Dr. Michael Busler in New Jersey, economist, man of the world. Dr. Busler, good to have you back.
Good morning, Kevin. It's my pleasure to be here.
Your thoughts initially on what happened in the stock market recently, sir?
Well, so we had a big sell-off yesterday. Not sure what's going to happen today yet. So the stock market got real spooked by the Chinese reaction to Trump deciding he's going to raise tariffs by September 1st. Recall essentially what happened, looking at the big picture here for a minute, when President Trump got into office, he took a look at every one of our trade agreements. And for whatever reason, every single one of them was slanted in favor of our trading partners and to the detriment of the U.S. For example, if they make a car in Europe and sell it in the U.S., we charge a 2.5% tariff. We make a car in the U.S., sell it in Europe, they charge a 10% tariff. China charges a 25% tariff. So President Trump said, look, I want to renegotiate all of these trade deals. Well, every one of our partners were reluctant to do that because they're in such a favorable position. So Trump, who's a business person and not a politician, a business person, when you run into a situation with a reluctant trading partner, you create a sense of urgency. And that's exactly what he did. He said, I'm going to put tariffs on everybody and everything until you start renegotiating. Well, already Mexico and Canada have a new trade deal with us. South Korea has a new trade deal. India and Japan are talking to us. And for the first time since Richard Nixon normalized relations with China, the Chinese are discussing this with us. Now, China is very reluctant to give up many of the advantages that they have, and they really don't want to play by the fair rules. So President Trump put the tariffs on them, and we thought we had an agreement back in April, and then at the last minute, China said, we're not going to do what we said we're going to do. So Trump said, okay, I'll give you until September 1st to come up with an agreement. If not, I'm putting more tariffs on, which he did. China retaliates with that by initially putting tariffs on our agricultural products that we sell to them, which of course hurts the sale of our agricultural products. Trump is going to put this next tariff on September 1st. China wanted to react to that. And one way to react to it, as they've been doing really for decades, is to revalue their currency, actually devalue their currency. So what that means is if when the tariff goes on, chances are prices are going to go up. But if they devalue their currency, it means it takes less dollars to buy their currency, which means their price of their goods to us goes down. And they're using that to offset some of the pain of the tariffs. The stock market, the original question was what happened to the stock market. The stock market got very spooked by this because this now looks like we're involved in a trade war. And a trade war where each side keeps trying to put on tariffs and penalties really does end up hurting both sides. We'd like to get to a situation where the trade war is over, and ideally, we'd like to get to where there's no tariffs on anything. On either side. I don't think we'll get there, but Trump is using this to force China to the table and negotiate fairly and behave as everyone else does in the international community. Because they've had such an advantage for so long, they're very reluctant to do that. I think that the Chinese economy is really hurting. These tariffs that Trump has placed on products like steel means the U.S. is buying far less Chinese steel. We're now making our own. So Chinese growth, which has been extremely rapid for more than a decade, they're growing at close to 10% a year, but it's now slowed down to under 6% a year, and it looks like it's slowing down even further. So we'll see what happens in the future, but the markets got spooked because it looks like we could be heading for a full-scale trade war is what the market believes. I don't think so, but that's what the market believes, and as a result, the stock market did poorly.
Dr. Michael Busler joining us, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. So the whole idea that the Chinese in the past, when they've gotten into trouble, they've devalued their currency. We've heard people saying, Dr. Busler, that on a scale of 1 to 10, their reaction was an 11. Your thoughts on, our relationship with China? You've broken it down, how the president is trying to fix this problem that has been ignored by previous administrations. Now we've got the stock market going crazy, people speculating. Will the Chinese get the message, or will they continue to try their cheating ways?
Well, at some point, they're going to have to come to the table fairly. China is hurting by this. When they devalue their currency, it essentially means that they can't afford to have the price of their goods go up because of these tariffs. They're afraid it would hurt their economy too much. So they've devalued the currency. Now, that makes their goods cheaper, so it offsets the effect of a tariff. However, it makes our goods more expensive for the Chinese to buy. Now, you would think China would say, well, that is not that much of a concern for us. However, China does not have the ability to produce enough food to feed their population. So when they devalue the currency, now to buy American agricultural products, food, the price is going to be significantly higher, and that's going to put a burden on the Chinese consumer. China's also said we're going to stop buying American agricultural products. Well, they certainly can do that. They're going to have to buy from somebody else, but somebody else, like in South America, is going to be more expensive for them. So the longer they keep doing this, the higher the prices to their consumers will be on staple products like food. And I think Trump's pressure is going to ultimately turn out to be a positive thing. There may be some bumps in the road. Many analysts think this trade war could go on for a long time. I don't think so. I think, as I said, China is hurting, and eventually, as Trump believes, they're going to have to come to the table and start negotiating.
But in the short term, apparently now we're hearing, Dr. Busler, here on KIDO Talk Radio, that American farmers will be hurt. Idaho farmers will be hurt. Is that true?
Well, if China stops buying, the farmers will be hurt, at least in the short term. Now, President Trump has passed some aid packages to minimize some of the hurt that will be placed on farmers. I don't know for a fact, but it seems to me the farmers that I've been in contact with, while they feel the pain and they appreciate the president trying to help them with some aid, they believe that in the long run, this will turn out to be favorable to them. Foreign markets have been closed to, particularly in China, have been closed to American manufacturers, not just in agriculture, but in other areas, have been closed for years because of these high tariffs that China has placed on our products, and we don't reciprocate. We put a 2.5% tariff on their products. So the farmers will feel some pain. Hopefully, it's short term. President Trump will try to minimize that pain with some aid packages, but the long-term goal is to have all foreign markets, including China, fairly open to U.S. manufacturers, including the agricultural industry, and that should benefit everybody into the long run.
Well, that is reassuring. Does the president have the political backing to weather the storm, considering everybody is so tuned into the stock market?
That's a very difficult question. I don't think this is going to be an easy thing for the president to do. There are a number of things that the president does when he first takes the action. I get nervous. My stomach starts to churn. I figure, what the heck is this guy doing? But then when you start to see some positive results come about, you realize that President Trump is not a politician. He doesn't do things that are politically correct. He doesn't convene summits and drag things out into the future and kick the can down the road to the next president, as past presidents have done. A business person confronts a problem, especially if it affects your bottom line, confronts a problem immediately, looks at all the options, and tries to come up with the best solution. And that's what President Trump is trying to do in as short a time period as possible. China has enjoyed this favorable position really since the 1970s. So it's going to be very difficult to get them to change. But I believe Trump is confronting them, and he's saying, listen, you can't keep doing this. And they don't. China also doesn't respect our intellectual property. It means they steal our secrets and our technology. And Trump wants to put an end to this before it turns into a very serious problem. So there will be some short-term problems. I think in the long term it'll work out, and I hope President Trump has the political backing to be able to carry this out.
Dr. Balcer, we always appreciate you joining us. If people want to get a hold of you, read your work, whether it's in The Hill or other publications, how can they do that?
Yeah, a couple of easy places on my Twitter account, @mbusler, that's @MBUSLER. You can find all my columns. And if you're on Facebook, I have a Facebook page called Funding Democracy. So just search Funding Democracy and all my columns will come up there.
Final word for people that are jittery about their stocks today, their mutual funds, 401ks. Any words of wisdom? Yeah. Any I don't know, positive news you can give them?
Yeah, here's what I would say. Don't look at the stock market for the next 30 days. Just don't look at it. In another week or two, maybe shorter, we'll have recovered all of the losses that we've incurred. And if people are looking, most people put their money into a retirement account. They're years away from retiring. So don't worry about the short-term fluctuations. In the long term, the stock market will provide good returns. The stock market, even after the big drops of the last day or two, the stock market is at the same level today as it was on June 5th, which means, so from June 5th till today, a couple of months, you didn't earn anything in the stock market, but generally you're still having an up year. So don't get too worried about the day-to-day fluctuations. What's going to happen in the next day or so, investors are going to look at stock prices and say, there's some real bargains out there because corporations are still very profitable, and I think the stock market's going to recover what it lost probably within the next week or two.
Dr. Busler, we appreciate you. We'll have you back. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kevin. My pleasure.
All right, coming up next, people are blaming white nationalism. People are blaming the president. Of course, people aren't blaming the shooter. One was a big fan of Elizabeth Warren. The other didn't like people, was a racist. But the other guy was a lefty. One was a righty. Why are they only covering the lefty? We'll give you the truth next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. God bless you. God bless America. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Yesterday, as you heard right here on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, the president talking about red flag laws and coming out in favor of those. Obviously, that is something that has been debated in Idaho. We'll take your thoughts on that. But more importantly, and look, we always want to hear what you have to say. And, as we've been doing this program for 10 years now in the Treasure Valley, almost 10 years. Don't count your chickens till they're hatched. Just ask that to Reverend Wright. We have people that, whether it's the TV stations that now want to try and mimic talk radio or others that try to mimic what we do. Look, your opinion's always welcome here. And the conservative opinion especially, because as we continue to go deeper into the year, we have more and more people trying to silence conservative, patriotic thought, which is just crazy in the world we live in today. Let's get to Veronica Escobar. She is a Democrat congresswoman. On Morning Joe yesterday, she said the president of I'll let you hear what she has to say.
The media has a big responsibility to life and safety in our country. Fake news has contributed greatly to the anger and rage that has built up over many years. News coverage has got to start being fair, balanced, and unbiased, or these terrible problems will only get worse. That's from the President of the United States. What's your reaction to that?
It is shocking to me that he is so utterly self-aware. And this is why, from my perspective, he is not welcome here. He should not come here while we are in mourning. This is one of the sites of one of his rallies. I heard Mika earlier mention that violence increased. Statistically, violence went up, hate crimes went up in communities where he had held rallies. He came into one of the safest communities in the nation. And as a result, or maybe not as a result, that is probably unfair. But months later, a gunman came into our community. Someone from outside of this community came into this beautiful, tranquil.
So here we have it. We have a congresswoman walking it back a little, a day or two after a day after the shooting, blaming 2 days after the shooting, blaming the president of the United States for this deranged, sicko gunman, right? And what does that say? Whether you like someone or not, you have to have respect for the office of the presidency. That's what we heard for years under old Obama, right? We heard for years and years and years, you've got to be nice to Obama because he's the president. And yet here we have this tragedy and we have people saying the president caused this. The president didn't cause this. It was the shooters, right? The president didn't cause this problem. And yet you have people trying to frame him for it. We'll have more on that in a minute. First, traffic and weather together. Our time is 6:25. Good morning, Dave.
We need to do is the president of the United States has to stop igniting the flames of hatred and bigotry and division in this country. We all bleed the same. We all defend this nation.
There we have it. Former Democratic Congressman Luis Gutierrez says he wants President Trump to stop igniting hatred and bigotry and accused the Republican Party for not taking any action on gun control because they're owned by the NRA. Does this sound like someone who wants to come up with a solution for a problem?
When it comes under attack, we are all Americans, not just you, Mr. Trump, and the people you want to vote for you. Represent us all. I don't believe any of what you said today.
So there we have it. There we have it indeed. So we've heard some sound. We've heard from Dr. Bustler talk about the China war, the China trade war. And by the way, our own Dave Petzo will be joining us in the 7 o'clock hour to go over this. But this is crazy. This is why some of us don't watch television news. This is why we don't trust the media. This is why we sit back and we, on one hand, we pray for the people that have been killed innocently in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas. And we worry that it could happen to us. Now, there are two ways to solve this problem. You, in fact, conceal carry, and you give yourself a fighting chance. Or we go the route that the Democrats want to go, which is disarming America, disarming you, disarming everybody. What makes more sense? To me, keeping people armed. And it's just like a couple years ago when we had the rash of school shootings. The media portrayed it like every school was a danger zone, a powder keg where somebody could be shot at any moment. And yet you had teachers, students, parents going to schools all across the Treasure Valley each and every day. That's the beauty of this program. We go to schools and these folks just educate kids. And yet, what is it? Rahm Emanuel said, never let any crisis go to waste. What we're seeing here is not a conversation about mental illness, not a conversation about prosecuting the bad people. By the way, don't you find it strange when they go, well, the feds are going to prosecute him, this guy's going to get the death penalty? I don't think that he cares that he murdered how many people. The guy in Dayton got killed. These people don't care. You cannot rationalize with crazy, can you? But this crazy stuff about blaming the president for everything is just insane. We've got Gutierrez saying, "Don't call me a breeder." Why can't the Democrats step down for a moment and say, what can we do to help the people that have been impacted by this? We've got Jake Tapper calling Republicans sissies. Where's the movement? Beto O'Rourke saying, quite frankly, that Donald Trump is a white nationalist encouraging violence. Where's the adult in the room? Cory Booker, the president is responsible for the shooting in El Paso, Texas. Now, coming up, this is where you come in. For years, the state of Idaho, because of what happened in northern Idaho with the Aryan nations, whether you lived here or not or lived through it, racist and white in Idaho. This white nationalism thing. Can people define for me what white nationalism is? Is it the KKK because they're a joke? Is it the neo-Nazis? Because we're hearing awful lot about this white nationalism. We'll talk about it next. And again, it's crazy that people are blaming the president of the United States. Right? 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Welcome back, Maggie.
The United States, who is particularly responsible. I, in my faith, have this idea that you reap what you sow, and he is sowing seeds of hatred in our country, and this harvest of hate violence that we're seeing right now lies at his feet. When you have the president from the highest moral office in our land talking about invasions and infestations and shithole countries, the kind of things that come out of his mouth that so harm the moral fabric of our nation, he is responsible. He's responsible when he has taken no action whatsoever to even condemn white supremacy.
You know what's weird is here you have Senator Booker, who is making a statement there blaming the president of the United States on NBC television. Meet the Press. Meet the Press is the oldest, longest-running political program in the United States. It's equivalent to what we run here, Idaho Insights. That show has been on longer than any other shows. And then you have NBC airing the blank hole comment along with Senator Booker saying that. Now, whether your parents told you this, whether you tell your kids, I don't believe that really swearing adds a lot of credibility to the argument, but we'll get back to that. Joining us now, Jeff Monosso, Fox News Radio on KIDO Talk Radio. Jeff, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kevin.
Dayton. The latest on Dayton, it seems to be semi-eclipsed by El Paso, but certainly just as important, if not more so.
Well, Dayton police continue poring over the shooter's past, his writings, his electronic footprints, to try and get to the bottom of why. Though, as you know, in our talks over the years from these types of situations and mass shootings, you rarely get the answer to that. There are people who are trying to paint political pictures within these narratives, on one side with El Paso and on another side with Dayton. Though at this point, a true motive is just something that police aren't giving us. Right now, we can sort of paint a picture of this gunman in Dayton as somebody who is seriously mentally disturbed. People who know him describe a guy who is very disturbed. Friends of this gunman tell the Dayton News that they cut ties with him earlier this year because he would unexpectedly brandish guns, and once talked about shooting up a bar, and so that is kind of allowing us a picture into his psyche. As for a motive, why he would do something like this, we just still don't know.
Indeed, of course, trying to figure this out, trying to figure out whether or not this could have been prevented. As you know, Jeff, you've covered these for years. That is a tough one, figuring out if there were warning signs or not on these cases.
Well, it appears that there were red flags everywhere surrounding the shooter in Dayton, and yet he was still able to obtain the weapon he used, and an AR-15 with 100-round clips. So thank goodness that police were there within seconds to be able to take him out, and they did before he entered Ned Pepper's bar. He was just about to grab that door and go inside. It's where people were fleeing. There were a lot of people inside. Had he got inside those doors, he would have. It would have been awful. But nonetheless, 9 people are dead, and dozens are wounded. 11 still hospitalized this morning in Dayton from this guy, and there are a lot of questions that remain. And so police are continuing to go through his past, his electronic footprint, his phone, his online activity, his writings, to try and come up with some sort of answer. All while Ohio Governor Mike DeWine plans to outline his proposal today, designed to deal with gun violence and mental health. We don't know. We don't have an insight as to what that's going to be. But President Trump is also going to be visiting Dayton tomorrow. We'll be there on the ground as well.
You know, there have been reports, and I don't know if it's been confirmed, that he shot his sister.
He did shoot his sister. In fact, we're told that this gunman went down to the Oregon district with his sister and her friend, and that she was one of the first to die. And the police chief, Richard Beal, said it's hard to fathom how this guy could shoot his own sister. But it's also hard to believe that he didn't recognize his own sister when he was shooting her. But that they just don't know at this point. The FBI, state investigators are also on scene trying to determine, what set this guy off and how to prevent it in the future. But it just seems like a revolving cycle. One of the quotes that I found most powerful yesterday was from a surgeon who basically said that it was a trauma surgeon who said that, quote, "It's just nauseating, to tell you the truth, and frustrating that this pattern continues and that people continue to make it one thing versus another. It really shouldn't be that way," unquote. And he's talking about politics and how this is just, injected in the political cycle, and it's got to be President Trump's fault, or it's got to be somebody else's fault. It's frustrating a lot of people that this is being used to score political points. I think that mental health is certainly a factor in this. But how can we prevent this from happening in the future? Where are we as a country? I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
Jeff Monosso on the scene. We appreciate you. We'll continue to look forward to your reports when the president goes to Dayton. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. Remember, you heard the president yesterday talking about, what could and what should be done. Here's what he said if you missed it on KIDO Talk Radio.
We must reform our mental health laws to better identify mentally disturbed individuals who may commit acts of violence and make sure those people not only get treatment, but when necessary, involuntary confinement.
There we have it. So, are we going to take mental health very seriously, which we haven't in quite some time? And let's face it, the gunman in El Paso, he got his weapons legally. We'll assume the guy in Dayton, Ohio did as well. So what are we going to do? More further restrictions? Red flag laws? Mr. President, what say you?
Fourth, we must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process.
Right. Rapid due process. Now, before we get to more of the president here, and then we have the media and the Democrats' ability and agenda to blame the president, let's just have a conversation, right? There are, and I use this when we're talking about people of the Islamic faith. If all people of the Islamic faith were bad, the world would be constantly at war. Not like what we have in the Middle East, where you do have Muslim governments, Muslim terrorists killing Christians that goes underreported. But just like you have people in this country that practice the faith of Islam peacefully, you have millions, and I mean millions of people that own firearms. Yesterday, I didn't get to this story, and it really isn't a story. I was visiting my neighbors, and you visit your neighbors, and I'm sure you have great neighbors. If you don't have great neighbors, it's horrible. I've been there. I was visiting my neighbors, and this young man came up to me and just said, "Hey, Kevin Miller, how you doing?" And he and his son were going shooting. Not a bad bone in their body. A bonding day of shooting, of practicing self-defense, of being an American male, of being an American. And I thought to myself, my goodness gracious, the media never portrays the millions, and I mean millions, of responsible, patriotic gun owners when these tragedies happen. The media and the Democrats, their responsibility is to go after the guns. That's all they care about. Kind of like when you go to the all-you-can-eat wing place and you haven't eaten for 24 hours and you just are famished. That's not due process. Oregon has red flag laws. I believe the state of Idaho actually passed a law against it, right? That came up a couple years ago. But at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, the president saying this, I can't really see a national red flag law. Can you? Then you have the New York Post saying, now is the time. The NRA is in disarray. They're dealing with the problem at 50,000 feet. Why not deal with it at the local level like we do here in Idaho?
Second, we must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence. We must stop or substantially reduce this, and it has to begin immediately.
Right. Now, how do we do that? Yesterday, we talked about God, and we talked about guns. Has America gotten better when we took God out of schools? And to my agnostic or atheist friends who smugly look down on people of faith, how has America gotten along without God and guns in schools? Not so good, I believe. Not so good. And when you take a look at the direction the Democrats want to take us, the police are the criminals are innocent, just like during Obama. When you take a look, every American will not have the right to keep and bear arms to protect their families. You will not be allowed to say illegal immigrant. Open borders, Americans will be paying for the rest of the world to come here, pull up a chair and have a good time. That's not the world that Donald Trump, Kevin Miller, and Sean Hannity represent, where you go out and you earn. We're not seeing that, are we? I wish the Democrats and Jake Tapper and others would take a look at families and people and to those parents that saved their 2-month-old little girl. Imagine what was going on in their minds. I don't think it was about gun control. Is there a mental health crisis? Yes, there is. Is there a solution to it? I believe so. But the president of the United States, and now people want to take shots at Donald Trump for talking about red flag laws, super duper due process. I don't know how many people would be comfortable with that. I don't think that I would be.
Fourth, we must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms. and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process.
Now, on the other hand, let's say they take the mentally disturbed firearms. You don't think that they're going to get it anymore? Well, Kevin Miller, you don't make it easy for them. Okay. But if someone is mentally disturbed enough that you take away their guns, shouldn't you take their freedom away and put them in a facility? It doesn't seem to me that this strategy has been that well thought out. More next. Kevin Miller on your home for Hannity, KIDO Talk Radio.
We must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process.
There we have it, the President of the United States.
Stop your anti-immigrant rhetoric. Stop the hatred.
Angry Bernie.
It was fueled by hate.
Clueless Klobuchar.
Hey, Beto, do you think the president is racist? Well, Jesus Christ, of course he's racist.
Brainless Beto, who uses the Lord's name in vain. How about Mayor Pete?
This is terrorism, and we have to name it as such. It is very clear that the loss of American life in...
All right, enough of that. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Kevin Miller in the morning coming up. We'll take a look at the stocks. More of your phone calls. Actually, when we're taking a look at, the future, we take a look at red flag laws. The president and others saying this is the way to go. On the other hand, let's face it, we can pass laws. Look, there are thousands of laws on the books when it comes to guns, gun control, getting rid of guns, you name it, right? Thousands. It's like immigration. We pass laws, we just don't enforce them. So when the law doesn't protect you, isn't it incumbent upon yourself, your responsibility to protect your family, yourself from harm? And yet the Democrats and others want to blame the president, want to blame the gun owners, want to blame white nationalism. Well, what about the suspects? What about the killers? What about the bad people? What about someone that said, I think this guy is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. We need to do something about him. Let's call the police. And you talk to professional law enforcement people, they will tell you lots of issues when it comes to mental illness. Our friend, retired Ada County Sheriff Gary Rainey, who would appear on this program all the time, he may or may not have agreed with the calls, but he talked about the mental illness. The biggest mental health care facility in the state of Idaho, the Ada County Jail. Now, politicians can sit there and go, we mean it this time. We're going to be good politicians and take your guns. We're going to be good politicians and do something about the mental health issue. But in reality, they're just looking to get elected, sadly. The real reform has to come at the local level. Let me share a thought with you next. First, KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller in the morning, traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. Boy, that sounds good. And by the way, a big shout out to everyone who's working outside. Now, I'm going to talk about myself, whiny, sniveling, goofy, sweaty Kevin Miller. When I go outside in between the air conditioning and the air conditioning, I'm going, woo, it's tough. But those men and women that are in the heat all the time, the roofers that are hitting the ground running right now because it gets too hot, the people that are paving the roads, big props. And to your family's so proud of you. Coming up next, we'll talk a little bit about making a change.